I'm going to replace the bearings in this Dewalt 625 router. I've already replaced the bearings once. I purchased the bearings initially locally from a supplier, and it ended up I don't like the bearings that they gave me. So I'm going to take those out and replace them with bearings from Dewalt. Originally, when I was doing this job, the bearings were not available from Dewalt. They were on back order. So I went ahead and replaced them with bearings locally so that I could at least continue using the tool. The original bearings are here. They were nice bearings. They were made in England. These are NSK bearings. Problem is that they're just worn out. So I'm going to replace them now. The lower bearing from DeWalt is an SKF, and this is a specialty bearing. It's made in Italy. I don't know the exact modifiers for the part, but it has a little more play, I think, in the bearing. And the top bearing from DeWalt is a CW bearing. It's a made in China bearing. I think this is just a standard 6201 bearing though. So we're going to take apart the router, take out the bearings, and reinstall DeWalt factory bearings. Here we go. This is the router. This is a 625. This is a Type 2 and it's made in Switzerland. We're going to use my Phillips head screwdriver to take off the caps from the top. The screws from the cap, rather. We'll take off the handles. There's a small Phillips in the switch, and we'll go ahead and take that out too. Pull the housing up. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a picture of the wiring with my iPhone so that I know where everything goes. I'll go ahead and take this speed control assembly off though so I can get a better look at things. The screws are the same, so it really doesn't matter. You don't need to remember what goes where. Okay. We'll pull the speed assembly off. And then we'll take two flathead screwdrivers and we're going to pry this magnet off. You want to be very careful to not break it. There we go. Okay, so now I'm going to disconnect some wires, take a picture, and continue with the disassembly. Alright, so picture taken. We'll go ahead and remove the speed controller. See, this is the switch arm. Take that out. Okay, let's turn this around. I'm going to take these screws out. So we can remove the cord. It takes out this little clamp. We'll set that aside. Get these screws out of there. Okay. And now we'll take the plastic keepers for the brushes out. I recently replaced these brushes. And now these are different screws, so we need to keep track of what goes where here. The plastic keeper, the brushes just lift out of here. See? That's a new brush from when I replaced it last time. Okay. Now we have a circlip connector that we need to remove. I don't have a circlip ring remover, but I do have some tiny pliers, and the tips of these pliers will fit in the holes of that clip.
See? Okay.
So now we're going to start to separate the yellow body from the metal housing. To do that, there are 4 Phillips screws that we need to remove.
Here, here, and so on. So we'll take these screws out.
Okay, now this is probably the most important part, and that's having a gear puller. You're going to have to use this gear puller to be able to lift up this top bearing. This gear puller is a Craftsman gear puller. I bought this at my local Sears store. It's an off-the-shelf puller. I've switched the legs so that the narrower portion is at the bottom. I'm going to put this so that it grabs on the plastic at the bottom. Okay.
Okay, I'm going to start to separate the housing here. So we use an open-ended wrench, actually a closed-ended wrench.
You can hear it coming. And what it's doing is pulling the bearing off the armature. There we go.
And there are the
Mounting bolts. Get those. Okay. So here I'll just take a socket on an extension, and I can just push this out or tap it out. All right. There we go. And there we go. We've got some wavy washers. And we have the old bearing. So this is the bearing from Dewalt. It's a 6201 RS CW made in China. So wavy washers and bearing. And this can just be put in by hand. And there we go. Okay, so that's the upper bearing. Now we have to do the lower bearing.
We'll continue disassembly of this base and remove. There we go. Okay. Set this aside.
And now to remove the lower bearing, we remove the nut from the collet. Okay. And there are 3 screws. We're going to remove those.
Take that out while we're at it. There we go.
This little assembly that is for the locking pin. Set that aside. It's got a spring in the bottom. Okay, now we have a nut that has some grooves, and we're going to have to put something in here and tap this nut out. But to keep this from moving, we're going to have to grab onto the armature. And that's where I've got my vise with its soft jaws. There we go. Okay. There we go. Okay. Now we have to begin to pull this off. Okay. And we can assemble this. Okay. Looks like we got a good bite. Back to the wrench. There we go. And that's actually coming out pretty easily. It may not be that easy for you. These have been replaced ones. Okay. There we go. Socket. This is a 24 millimeter. Just tap it. Okay, and now we do reassembly.